We have confirmation that it was U.S. intel ops on the ground in Washington, D.C., and not those bad old Russians that Hillary Clinton keeps trying to blame very unsuccessfully that actually hacked into her emails, the Clinton campaign emails. It wasn't Russia. Now, this coming from numerous sources from the Podesta hack, which then led to them getting into the hands of Julian Assange. We have an article. It's been confirmed. The U.S. intel operatives leaked this. Actually came from on the ground in Washington. Numerous sources have told this to Alex. They didn't want to be named on camera, but the motivation for doing this, of course, is an attempt to save America from a Clinton presidency, because they know that Clinton, she's very rampantly corrupt, very dangerous, and they were concerned with how she mishandled the classified information as far back as 2009, when officials from the National Archives became aware of the violation of the record-keeping procedures that the Department of State, Hillary Clinton, was presiding over. They decided to take action. Now, she's repeatedly insinuated that Russian agents were responsible for the release of these emails. Of course, we know that simply isn't true. She even had the audacity to threaten military action against Russia because they had hacked into her server, her homebrew server that was set up in her little closet. Turns out it was all bull. None of it was true. It was a smokescreen. And they were trying to blame the Russians, of course. Now, this was backed up by a British ambassador, Craig Murray, who traveled to Washington for a dinner. He was able to confirm sources on the ground directly that back up everything that we're saying, that it was, in fact, insiders on the ground in Washington and not Russia. Now, former Deputy Secretary of State Steve Pieczenik talked to Alex Jones, breaking a record silence about the coup that is underway in Hillary's camp.
We've had a civil coup that was initiated by Hillary and her cohorts based on corruption and political cronyism. We had a counter coup, which was initiated several days ago by some of the people in 16 different organizations, as you mentioned. However, there's been more and more information coming out, and now we are concerned that two people are specifically targeted by our intelligence system. One is Abedin. The issue of Abedin and her connections to Saudi Arabia and the Salafists, and particularly with those Salafists or Imam who funded al-Qaeda and subsequently, presumably, Osama bin Laden, she is a very concerned target for us. And the reason for that is, the question is, she was born here in the United States, left after 2 years. How did she come back in 1996? Get to the top of the ladder, political ladder, and become an assistant to Hillary Clinton, when in fact her connections, including her mother, her brother, and others, are very much tied in with the Wahhabis, Saudi Arabia, and the government? The answer from my perspective, and possibly from those who I work with, is that she's very much of an agent of influence, and both an operative and infiltrator on behalf of the Saudi Arabia.
And that's why she had the 650,000 emails reportedly under the name Insurance on Hillary, gathering data.
And the question is, who gave her the top secret clearance that she had received after having been here only 2 years after 1996? Who, in fact, in our three-letter agency, worked in Saudi Arabia? There's only one agency. It's either Catholics in Action or the CIA, John Brennan, who has been very close to the Saudi Arabians, and also the Israelis. Now, why do I talk about both these issues? The ultimate distraction in this whole storyline with Abedin and Anthony Weiner has been, to me, somewhat of a farce. It's been either contrived or combination of, ongoing problems, but a highly contrived scenario, which distracts from the fact that Abedin is very much of a Saudi agent. However, she married a Jew, a pathetic Jew, but nevertheless, that neutralized the notion that she was a total Saudi influence. Peter Katchik was brought into the Justice Department as a result of being Podesta's lawyer, and Peter Katchik
can't even give it away. And maybe that's because you don't really cover issues that people care about. And specifically, we are in a war. We're not where Western Europe is. We're not there yet. But with a Clinton presidency, we very well could be. There is a war going on right now on the streets of Paris, and armed migrants are seen fighting each other in the streets. We've seen this since the closing of the Calais jungle. They've moved to the north of Paris. Now, to hear French officials on the ground, they are so out of touch. They actually deny that people from the Calais jungle have migrated, despite the fact that cameras are on the ground and they're interviewing migrants that actually can speak English. And they're saying, look, we came from Calais. We got a bus ticket or a train ticket. And many of the times, if they can't afford a ticket, they just get on the train anyway. And we've seen what they're doing. Now, that specifically was in the northern part of Paris. It was around the Stalingrad metro, and it was turned into a refugee battleground. What we see are these rival gangs of migrants, and they set upon each other with violence, with billy clubs, rioting in the streets. Meanwhile, pedestrians are simply walking past, victimized by what they're seeing, powerless, helpless to do anything about it. This is falling on Hollande's doorstep, and yet he's denying that they have a problem. This situation makes Merkel's immigration policy actually look somewhat organized, which is a really tough thing to say because, wow. But they have a serious problem. Meanwhile, the media and officials, the globalists in charge, no problem, nothing to see here. But normal people with half a brain can actually see that there is a problem. And Putin even remarked on the situation. He warns European countries that they have absolutely no future if they don't get a handle on the migrant crisis and establish some law and order. Now, he says a society that cannot defend its children today has no tomorrow. He said he's totally bewildered at the fact that European countries are taking in so many migrants, and it's increasing the number of rapes sweeping the continent. Of course, we know that the mainstream media will not cover these rapes. They absolutely refuse to do it. But we covered this specific rape case that President Putin highlights. And it's the case of the 10-year-old boy in Vienna that was raped by an Iraqi refugee. The refugee was ultimately, the charges against him were dropped because they were able to say effectively that the refugee did not know what he was doing to the 10-year-old boy was in fact raped. Now, he claimed he had a sexual emergency and that he didn't understand that the boy didn't want to be raped. Oh my gosh, we are really in for it. He says it didn't fit into my head. What on earth are thinking over there? That's what Putin has to say. And I couldn't agree with him more. The rationale, it's like the inmates are running the asylum, and rape cases like this of this 10-year-old boy, unfortunately, they are a dime a dozen. We hear about so many of them, but you really have to dig, especially in mainstream media, because they completely ignore the fact that this is directly related to the migrant crisis that is underway. And by the way, if Hillary Clinton has her way, she's already said it. She's going to ratchet up the refugee population coming in, non-vetted refugees, mind you, because our Homeland Security Department, it is not equipped on the ground to vet these refugees. She doesn't care. And what's happening in Vienna, this is absolutely what will happen here if Hillary Clinton has her way. And the president of Russia is even remarking on it, saying he is totally bewildered at this fact. Now, we know that regarding the refugee crisis, ISIS has infiltrated military populations, refugee populations, and they are proud of this fact. It is unbelievable. There is one specific article that is so troubling to me. When I read it, I nearly, sick to my stomach doesn't begin to describe it. So the Islamic State, they have this magazine. It's called Nashir now, and they published an article asking lone wolves living in Western Europe and the United States to begin attacking. And specifically, I'm directly quoting, this was written in English as well as Arabic and French. And this is what they had to say. Every soldier fights on the caliphate land in Iraq and Syria, wishes to be in your place, meaning wishes to be in Western Europe or America. We can cut the tail off the snake, but it sooner will grow again. But you have its head. Brave Mosul is bleeding. You should stop its bleeding by carrying out exhaustion operations on the enemy's power and blood. Cut their heads by your own knives. Let us hear your guns blasting their heads. If this doesn't make your stomach turn, And yet our politicians, like Hillary Clinton, they are totally ignoring these facts, because to look at the facts, you know, a moratorium on populations that are coming out of ISIS strongholds, we're not properly vetting them. She knows that. And the globalist in charge, the elitist running amok, wanting our country to go to hell in a handbasket, frankly. They see what's happening on the ground in France and Western Europe. They want it here. This rape case, you know what? When Clinton is in office, God forbid, we will be covering these night after night after night, rest assured. Now, the president took to a stage in Ohio this week, and the nerve of this guy, and forgive me for calling him this guy, the president of the United States, he basically insinuates that if you don't vote for Hillary Clinton, you're a sexist. So if you don't accept her policies, her radical view of immigration, the fact that she doesn't want any borders at all, you know, the fact that she's possibly a Chinese operative, if you don't want her, well, you're just plain old sexist. He takes to a stage, he refuses to call Donald Trump by his name. He calls him the other guy. How disrespectful is that? So I'm just going to start from the top. This is what the president had to say to this crowd. There's a reason why we haven't had a woman president before. The guys out there, I want to be honest. Well, I guess there's a first for everything right there. He's trying to be honest, but then he goes ahead and lies and spins this ridiculous narrative that because she's a woman, she deserves to be president. So he says, you know, there's a reason we haven't had a woman president before. And we have to ask ourselves as men, because I hope my daughters are going to be able to achieve anything they want to achieve. And I know my wife is not just my equal, she's my superior. Well, isn't that sweet? We all want men to love their wives, but the way he's going about this, playing the woman card, it whiffs of desperation. It reeks of desperation. Vote for me. I have a you-know-what. That's her only selling point. And look, celebrities are taking to the airways in this desperate, hilarious attempt. They're saying, look, we know you don't like her. We know she's hard to stomach. We personally can't stand her either. But please, please, please go out and vote for her anyway. She's a woman, for crying out loud. And the president, the audacity of him, you know, to say that Hillary is electable simply because she's a woman. Well, that's absurd. And then he says, the guy is going to be your champion, referring to Donald Trump. Don't be bamboozled.
My fellow Americans, my fellow humans on planet Earth, there is an epic, legendary awakening of nationalism and populism happening from the Brexit to the Donald Trump phenomenon to Russia pulling out of the New World Order and arresting the bankster oligarchs. Humanity's will for self-determination and freedom is expressing itself. The great classical liberalisms of Thomas Jefferson and Francis Bacon are reawakening right now. And it's because of the historical times we live in that InfoWars is going to embark on an unprecedented 52-hour broadcast. We've done 24-hour broadcasts before, but we've never gone 52 hours. This Monday, from 11 a.m. Central, right through Tuesday, right into Wednesday, when the Wednesday show ends at 3 p.m. Central, we will broadcast for an unprecedented, legendary, over-the-top 52 hours live. The second great awakening is taking place. We are in the dawn of a new era of renaissance, of rediscovery and human liberty. Donald Trump, the Brexit, InfoWars, Matt Drudge, Breitbart, WorldNet Daily, and so many others are only one small manifestation in the fire of liberty that is now exploding across the globe. You can see it in the news. You can feel it. You can witness it on the street. History's happening. They always say this election is the most important in our lifetimes, and we laugh it off. I wouldn't even get involved in past elections because they were so clearly frauds. This one's the big kahuna. A clear demarcation line, a crossroads between nationalism and tyranny, between Americanism and globalism. That's why we're doing this one time and one time only, because history's happening. A 52-hour live transmission kicking off Monday, November 7th, 2016 at 11 a.m., running right through Election Day the 8th, into the night at 3 p.m. and quite frankly beyond. It's historical, and it's part of overthrowing the dinosaur media, not just overthrowing the two-party corrupt system. I want to see 10 million viewers tune in over the 50-plus hours, and that's where you come in. You are the heart and blood of the InfoWar. If you spread the link to Infowars.com/show and point out that this is the alternative new media, this is the rebellion, this is the modern Paul Revere operation, then all of you are riding right beside us, not behind us. So spread the word, my Paul Reveres, no matter where you live in the world. To information warfare arms, the globalists are coming, and they will be met on the field. Infowars.com, powered by 1776.